everyone, it's Jananie and welcome back to my channel, This Story Ain't Over. Today I want to do a little bit of a recommendation video for the people who are trying to get back into their reading girly era and have thus far failed to do so. All the books on this list are relatively fast-paced books, ones that I personally loved, and ones that I think are perfect for you to pick up in 2024 to get back into your reading girly era. These are a collection of favorites that I've accumulated over the past few years, and I've got books ranging from thrillers to contemporary fiction to literary fiction to romance to historical fiction and everything in between. So with all that said, the first book on this list is You Exist Too Much by Zaina Arafat. This is by a Palestinian American author, and this is a book that I would describe as a hot sad girl book, an unhinged woman book. It's one of those books that has so many excellent themes to it and it involves a chaotic and unhinged main character going through it. She is a woman caught between cultural, religious, and sexual identities, and she is truly just trying to exist and be her full self, but obviously she has complicated relationships with her mother, with her sexual identity. She's trying to figure out her cultural identity, being Palestinian, and what I love about this book is that it's just so messy. Our main character is going through it, and I feel like as someone who went through it last year, this was very much a comforting book. The book is told through vignettes that flash between the United States and the Middle East and involve our character going through different careers and different parts of her life and different relationships, both queer and otherwise, but it also deals with her mental health struggles along the way, and I think it was just such a well done novel and one that I constantly still think about, and it's definitely a book for the girlies who are just trying to figure themselves out. Next up I have a recent favorite of mine, and that is Finley Donovan is Killing It by Elle Cosimano. This is for the girlies who are just exhausted with what life is doing to them and just want something fun, something hilarious, and something mysterious. This is a bit of a cozy mystery and it follows a young mother with two children. She's recently divorced. She's also a writer and she's going through a tough time. She's trying to balance all of the things, and she's currently writing some mystery novels, and when this other random woman overhears Finley, our main character, and her agent talking about her recent murder mystery novel, that woman thinks that Finley is a contract killer and wants to hire her to kill her husband. It's this very outrageous concept, and there's a lot of convenient things that just happen in the book and lots of messy situations that Finley gets herself into. But along the way, you're gonna have so much fun. There's a bit of romance thrown in there. There's a lot of funny hijinks. There's also a really amazing female friendship in this book, and it's also a series. So once you're done this book, you can go and binge the other books in the series, and trust me, you're gonna have so much fun with them. Next, I have a couple books by one of my faves, and that is Talia Hibbert. These are both romances, and they are part of her series, The Brown Sisters. These are my two particular favorite ones, the second and third one, but you don't necessarily have to read these books in order. They are each about a different sister in the family, and each of the sisters has their own, very unique identities and very unique love stories. So, take a hint, Dani Brown follows our main character, Dani Brown, who is, I believe, a PhD student. She's also bisexual, so there's that representation, and this involves a fake dating relationship that she gets into with the big and brooding security guard at the school. My favorite thing about this book is not only the heartwarming characters, but also the super sexy scenes in this book. And then we have Act Your Ave, Eve Brown. This follows the certifiable hot mess of a youngest sister that Eve Brown is. I personally really connected with Eve Brown as a character. She's also neurodivergent like me, and that was just really exciting to see. And this involves a bit of a hate to love-ish romance. Our main character Eve ends up finding herself working at this bed and breakfast owned by the love interest, and he's a bit of a prickly guy, and she is someone who sort of flips his world upside down and really shakes up all of his regular routines, and just the way that these two fall in love is just so beautiful and heartwarming, and you're gonna love this one, trust me. Next up I have one for the working girlies, the publishing girlies, the reader girlies who want to become publishing girlies. So that book is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. This book is absolutely fantastic, and I love everything that R.F. Kuang writes, but this is her first ever sort of like contemporary thriller. I would say it's a satirical thriller as well. It's one that you're gonna read and really hate the main character and be so riled by, but you're also gonna have so much fun. You're gonna laugh out loud, and it's gonna give you a searing look into what the publishing industry is really like. As someone who worked in publishing, this was very accurate, but also just the perfect amount of over the top to make it a fun thriller. Basically, this book follows our main character June Hayward, who is this white author who has a good friend in publishing named Athena, who is this like big name in publishing. She's published a lot of really famous books, and she is a Chinese American author. When Athena dies unexpectedly through an accident, June steals her unfinished manuscript and decides to publish it as her own, rebranding herself as Juniper Song and sort of putting on this yellow face. From there, we're sort of following June through the trials and tribulations of publishing and also just the really awful things that she does along the way. This is a snarky, thought-provoking, thrilling read, and one that you're going to want to devour in a single day. Next up, I have one for the sad girlies, the ones who just want a good cry, and that is The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is one of the most beautiful romances I've ever seen. It takes the ancient Greek story of the Iliad and the Trojan War and Achilles, and we follow Achilles' best friend Patroclus from childhood, and we are seeing the unfolding of their relationship and through all of the tragic events of the Trojan War. This is a book that is absolutely passionate, beautifully written, and just so heartbreaking by the end. You will be sobbing dramatically and just wanting the best for our main characters. Every line of this book was just so beautiful and practically pure gold, and I just felt so much for our characters. Next up, I have a bit of a romance and a bit of a fantasy novel, and it's one by one of my favorite authors, and that is The Beautiful Ones by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This involves sort of a Regency era adjacent fantasy world and has a bit of a love triangle aspect to it, but also a bit of a magical element. I will say though that the magical element is really like tertiary to the entire story. The romance plot is actually the main focus of the book, and also all of the societal pressures on the women in the book. Essentially, we are following our three different characters, but the two main ones are Nina and Hector. Nina is this young woman going out into society and trying to find a husband, and she is sort of helped out by her cousin and his kind of well-connected and conniving wife. And then we have Hector, who is an entertainer who is lower on the society chain, but who has made himself into a much more grand man and much more prestigious man. And he is intent on sort of gaining revenge on one of his old loves, and Nina is sort of brought into the fray of this revenge plot. But although the book sort of starts this one way with these characters, by the end of it things take a very different turn, and the shift in the relationship dynamics in this book is just so beautifully done, and you'll honestly just be like flipping page after page wanting to know what's gonna happen next. And if you are a fan of like Jane Austen books or Regency era romances, this is definitely one that you'll love. Alrighty, this next one is another one for the girlies who just want to sob dramatically at the end of the book, and that is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. This has a historical aspect to it, a political aspect to it. It's essentially this romance of these star-crossed lovers who meet in 1953 in Tehran, Iran. They are teenagers and they are falling in love, and they are sending each other letters through this stationery shop. But because of the political upheaval in Iran, they are ripped apart, and also because of some other factors going on. And so they find themselves in very different situations, and our characters are going through very different struggles. And when the book actually opens up, we are meeting them when they are much older in sort of the present day, when they are potentially meeting again after many years. And so you're trying to figure out what happened between the present day and 1953. Since reading this the first time, I've already reread it, and I have sobbed dramatically at the end of it each time. So many of the lines in this book are so gorgeous, and this not only tackles this idea of the star-crossed lovers and like the political themes, but it also deals with the various struggles that our main character goes through, including themes to do with immigration, racism, motherhood, mental illness, and so many other well-explored themes that I loved seeing in this book. If you're looking for a heartbreaking read with some really beautiful lines, then this is the one for you. This next one is quite similar to The Stationery Shop. It's got that historical fiction element, that political element, and also that star-crossed lover element. And that is Next Year in Havana by Chanel Clayton. This is a really beautiful sort of dual timeline romance. We are following 19-year-old Elisa Perez in Havana in 1958. And amidst all of the political unrest that's going on, she finds herself in a clandestine affair with a revolutionary. And then we have the timeline in 2017 with Marisol, who is the granddaughter of Elisa, and she is traveling from Miami to Cuba to sort of explore her grandmother's past and sort of the political situation in Cuba. She's faced with what's going on in Cuba now and finds herself attracted to a man there in a way that she did not expect. The way this book travels through time and shows the generational effects of the the political unrest in Cuba is just so beautiful, and also the love stories in each timeline were just really beautifully done. This is for the girlies who are aware of the well-known truth that reading is always political, but that doesn't mean it can't be fun. Alright, next up I have a couple of fantasies for the fantasy-loving girlies. These are a couple cozy fantasies that I think are just so fun and really quickly paced, so you can just get through them really easily. So first I have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett. This is an absolutely adorable and cozy fantasy that you can really just devour in a couple days. This follows our sort of curmudgeonly Professor Emily Wilde, who is very much by the book and very interested in the science and does not care about all of the sort of social aspects of life. This is set in an alternate version of the 1900s, and there are fairies, and Emily Wilde is one of the foremost experts on fairies, and she's sort of compiling this encyclopedia of fairies, and she finds herself going to this small town to research this specific type of fae called the hidden folk, who no one really knows too much about, and she wants to include them as a chapter of her encyclopedia. But of course, in order to conduct her research, she needs to get to know the town folk and get to know the stories that they have to tell about the folk. And not only that, we also have a bit of a love interest going on with one of Emily's colleagues named Wendell Bambleby, who comes to visit her while she's in this small town, seeking to help her with her research. But Emily senses that there's something else going on, and she also senses that he might potentially be a fairy himself. Everything about this book was just so cute and adorable, from the fairies in the book to the romance to just our lovely main character Emily, who is not very good in social situations, but she's just trying to figure herself out, and she's trying to do her research, and she's very gung-ho about her career, and just following her was such a heartwarming experience. On the flip side, I have a cozy fantasy that's a bit more on the darker side and definitely has some darker themes to it, and that is Starling House by Alexi Harrow. This follows our main character Opal, who is a bit of a delinquent, a high school dropout, and she's also an orphan. She has a younger brother named Jasper who she really cares about and wants to see get out of their small town of Eden, where things are always going wrong and where no one really seems to be going anywhere. Now, the fantasy element of this book comes in the form of this very gothic manor house in Eden called Starling House, and it's been owned by several different people over the years, and our main character Opal has been obsessed with the children's book that was written by one of the previous owners of Starling House, and it's this children's book that involves going into the Underland and seeing these monsters, and she's been just so obsessed with the Starling House for years. But when she finds herself in a sticky situation confronted with the owner of Starling House, the current one, Arthur, she ends up convincing him to give her a job at the house, and she starts to learn the secrets of the house and all of these sinister things that are going on in their town. This is a book for the depressed girlies, the ones who see the darkness in themselves and are trying to find the light out, and for the ones who appreciate a nice dose of fantasy and a little bit of romance as well. Speaking of depressed girlies, this next book is a memoir that I absolutely love and highly recommend, and that is I'm Glad My Mom Died by Jeanette McCurdy. This is one of the most accessible memoirs I've ever read, and one that is written in such a darkly funny tone. Despite all of the very difficult things that Jeanette McCurdy goes through in this book, you are still following along, hoping for the best for her, and also sympathizing so much with everything that she went through. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Jeanette McCurdy, she was a star on Nickelodeon. She was in iCarly and Sam and Cat, and she talks about her experience being a child actress and the very, very toxic, abusive, and difficult relationship that she had with her mother. This goes through the very difficult years of Jeanette McCurdy's adolescence and childhood, and her very hard struggle with her mental health. I think if you've experienced even a fraction of the trauma or the mental health struggles that Jeanette McCurdy went through, then you will very much find yourself in this book and relate to a lot of the things that she went through. Alright, speaking of abusive relationships, this next one also involves an abusive relationship, but involves a main character who really fights her way through it, and that is A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson. This is the most seductive, enchanting fantasy / historical horror novel that you'll ever read. This basically follows one of Dracula's brides, Constanta, and she is telling this very long story through a letter to her lover, Dracula, who she leaves unnamed throughout the book. You're following her from when she first meets Dracula and the several hundred years that they spend together, and also the other lovers that they take along the way, and the polyamorous relationship that forms in the process. We follow her as she is dealing with the toxic and sort of abusive relationship that she has with Dracula, and how she loves him so deeply despite all of the wrong that he did to her. This is a thrilling, seductive, gothic book with vampires and a travel through history and some really beautiful characters with some very complicated relationship dynamics that you can't help but fall for. If you're looking for a book with lots of beautiful and empowering lines to it, then this is the one to pick up. Alrighty, and the final book that I have on this list is one for the reading girlies, and that is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. This is the ultimate like bookish romance, I would say. It involves a literary agent and a book editor in a sort of hate to love romance that really quickly evolves into something really beautiful. This book taps into the tropes that we see in romances, both in movies and books, and sort of flips them on their head. It takes this idea of like the, you know, cold city woman going to a small town and falling in love, takes that concept and sort of flips it on its head a bit. I absolutely loved our main characters, Nora and Charlie, and just the dynamic that they had between each other. If you're someone who needs convincing that you can be the heroine in your own story, then this is definitely the book to pick up. With that said, those are all of the books that I wanted to recommend to you all today. I hope that you found something new to read and one that you're excited to pick up. I absolutely love all of these books, and I think they're just such fun books, but also some heartbreaking, beautiful books that will just get you into reading and get you excited about reading again. I hope that 2024 will be a year full of reading for all of you. Let me know if you guys have read any of these books and what you thought of them in the comments down below. And if you have any recommendations for anyone else watching this video, leave them down below as well. As always, if you haven't already, go check out my Instagram, Goodreads, TikTok, and Bindery down below. My Bindery community is a really nice place where you can get exclusive content from me and also help me publish books under my imprint, Boundless Press. And aside from that, if you haven't already, go join my free Discord community as well. We do some reading sprints there every now and then. We just chit chat about different things, book related and not. So it's definitely a great place to find some connections with other viewers of my channel. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. So please remember that this story ain't over. Bye!